Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 209 with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by our good friends at Osseo Gear. Don is stuck in a hotel room, and I don't even know what state you're in, buddy. Where are you at?
I am in Kansas at the moment. No, I'm not. I was in Kansas earlier today. I'm in Missouri. I'm in Missouri now.
So the road warrior doesn't even know what state he's in half the time when he's out on these trips.
I've been all over this week. Started through Missouri, went to Kansas, went to Nebraska, went back to Kansas, and now I'm back in Missouri.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and give all of those watching YouTube a little bit of a warning. Don's Wi-Fi in his hotel is not real good, so you might see a little bit of a delay or flicker with his video feed. So we're gonna do the best we can while he's in the hotel. But Don, let's talk just a little bit about your consulting trail. We got some announcements to make about dealer events and open houses. We got a message from our good friend Andy, who breeds our trees that we talk about. Busy show with 5 great questions, but let's start with the consulting trail. What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. I started the week in Illinois, looked at a great property in Calhoun County. For those that don't know, Calhoun County, on one side of the county is the Mississippi River, the other side of the county is the Illinois River, and at the bottom of Calhoun County is where those two rivers meet, and some pretty rough terrain, but there's a ridge that kind of separates the county, so everything to the west flows into the Mississippi, everything to the east flows into the Illinois, and this property was right up on top of that ridge that divides the county. And some good flat areas up there on top. But, I've come up with a couple of new twists and I'm not going to share them here, but a couple new twists on the plans that I do, and put one of them to the test on this property. But one thing I really need to throw out there is, right now we're in that period of time where habitat work is happening. Anybody that's serious about their property, right now they're out there. We've had great weather, and guys are out there. And there's something that I've never seen addressed in the hunting industry that we need to talk about. And we hear all the time, south-facing slopes, south-facing slopes. Get out there and cut that bedding cover on the south-facing slopes. Do your TSI, do your hinge cuts on south-facing slopes, south-facing slopes. And that's important. When the temperatures are colder than normal, especially in the wintertime, and that's where those deer want to be, on those south-facing slopes where that sun is hitting them and they're able to keep warm. But here's what you need to remember is there's probably more days that the temperature, at least lately, is above normal than below normal. And when we was on this property in Calhoun County this week, we busted a bunch of does that were bedded on this side slope of a ridge. And those does were bedded on the north side of the property. And we'd been talking about this earlier in the day. And boom, there we bust these does that are bedded on the north slope. Snow on that slope. It was a warm day. Probably, I don't know, 20 degrees above normal for this time of year. And those deer were on the north slope. And guys that are out there doing their habitat work, don't get caught up on just the south-facing slope. Diversify. We talk about diversifying the cover. You want switchgrass and you want the heavy wooded cover, but you also want south-facing slopes and north-facing slopes. Don't forget the north. Again, a lot of times the temperature's above normal, and that's where the deer want to be. So, and I'd never heard anyone talk about that, but that really came to light this week when we jumped those does. And I mean, there was snow right there where those does were bedded, but temperature being 20 degrees above normal, they wanted to be where it was cool, not out on the sunny south-facing slope.
I try to model a lot of what we do after watching cattle in pasture and hill country. You get a thunderstorm roll in where it's really, really steep winds, and you'll see those cattle just right over the knoll where that wind's, blowing up over their back. I think deer do the same thing, and I do agree with what you're saying 100%. These fads and these, and I talk about south-facing slopes with my visits too, but I'd rather have bedding in the right areas for what the plan is with where the access of the tree stand is than worry about setting up a whole property that only centralizes around a south-facing slope. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think it's just ironic that I never even thought about it until here recently. The whole thing was the whole train of thought has been south-facing slopes for bedding cover. And the more I got to thinking about it, it just doesn't make sense to focus only on those south-facing slopes. And been an interesting week on the consulting trail for sure. That's one of the things that came to light Monday on that Calhoun County piece. And then later in the week, I was in Kansas. The first piece I looked at in Kansas, just a fantastic property. You might have seen my social media post. We were standing there, and I said, "This is the spot where a 200-inch buck is going to be killed." That is a really, really good property, and something that happened there that's probably worth sharing is Wes Delks and I were talking earlier about repeat clients. And just so happens I'm visiting 6 different clients on this trip I'm on, and 5 of those 6 are repeat clients. And I think that bodes pretty well for their satisfaction. But anyway, this is a repeat client. He had a property in Missouri, or still has a property in Missouri, actually, that I consulted on, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And he recently bought this Kansas property. And I told him this Kansas property is so much better, not just because it's in Kansas, but the layout of this property is so much better that he'll probably end up selling that Missouri for him. And Wes and I were talking how crazy it is on these repeat clients. Their second property that they buy is always way better than their first property.
That's hilarious. We haven't talked about this subject. You said you were talking with Wes about it. The week before we were in Shipshawana, I was down in around Russellville with our good friend Kevin Miller, and we had the same conversation with him. He goes and he's bought a second property, and he's in his mind thinking about access and where his sanctuary is and different wind directions out of the gate when he's looking at the property, where before it was probably more about price per acre and what he could get it for.
Well, I think that most deer hunters know what good deer habitat looks like, but I
Yep.
don't think most deer hunters know what a good property looks like. They find a property with good habitat and they think it's a good property. Well, there's more to it. I'll take a property that lays out good with bad habitat and I'll make good habitat. But if it
Right.
lays out poor, what are you going to do? There's not much you can do with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. We haven't really elaborated on that. 2 good points we haven't talked about on this show before: south facing hillsides and the second property. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, I was down in the Russellville area. And remember when I donated that consulting
Yep.
visit for that Haiti mission? So I got to meet the guy who won that. Super great people. They got a phenomenal property. I'm talking true sanctuary in the core. They can access 3.5 sides of the property without putting any intrusion on it. Exactly what you're saying. They came out of the box with half the problem solved.
Yeah. So then my next visit was with Joe Chambers in Nebraska, Chambers Custom Guns.
And
And
I'm not too happy with you, because if I would have known you were going there, I would have had you make arrangements for a transaction to be put in place. I still haven't bought one of those yet.
well, I'll tell you what, I got to handle a couple of his masterpieces, and uh, they're definitely worth the money for someone
Well,
that's serious about shooting. But
Well, maybe we need to head him up for making you and I matching Chasing Giants custom 1911s. Think he'd be up for that?
I bet he would. Al Foster and Joey's going out to hunt with Joe on his Nebraska piece.
They going turkey hunting out there?
They're going turkey hunting out there. And I was on so Joe bought a new farm, and just like we was talking, this new one he bought is significantly better than his first one. His first one is his homestead. It is what it is. Not a bad property whatsoever, but this new one has a world of potential. We came over this ride. We was going west from his place quite a ways uh, into Nebraska, and we came over this rise, and the terrain had been pretty flat up to this point. We came over this rise, and we crested that rise. It was like we was approaching the Smoky or the Rocky Mountains. The
Wow.
terrain was just, and I took a bunch of pictures. I'm going to be posting on my social media. It was almost like we was in elk country. I mean, we was
Wow.
climbing some hills, and literally looked like elk country, but had a big 50-acre alfalfa field on it, and so there's plenty of opportunity to put food on that. And Joe's committed to making that a super property, and I'm sure it will be.
I
But
think I saw that you all found a shed also, didn't you?
he did.
Yeah.
Right after we left, he stayed. He was going to try to shoot some coyotes after we was gone, and he found a shed or two, and he'd found a few before we'd got there too. But great property that Al and Joe will be shooting some turkeys on this spring.
They'll have fun out there. They're also coming to Kentucky to whack and stack some on the Peer family farm. So we might even, I think there's been some inclination that we might actually get you on your first turkey hunt this spring. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it happen or not, but you're open to trying it.
That is the plan. Um, I told Al, well, I got some big plans for this turkey hunt, but I told Al that if I walk up on a turkey after I shoot it and he's got a 200-inch rack on his head, then I'll probably be hooked. But that's what it's going to take.
Well, Steve Shields and I have already been kind of brainstorming about how we're going to video document this because, the spot that they killed all the turkeys on within minutes of being there last spring is where we'll probably put all of you all out. And I think it's going to be a good time. But I know you don't care about turkey hunting, but you care deeply about your friends. And I think this experience with your friends is going to be the more of a highlight than shooting a bird.
Yeah, if I do get one, I will have it mounted, no doubt about it. It may be the only turkey I shoot in my life, but it'll be the memories of the hunt.
Yeah. All right, well, let's take a quick break and listen to a spot from our friends from Osseo. Come back and make a couple announcements before we jump into questions for this week. So stay tuned.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit AssioGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
Okay, Don. Well, the first thing I wanted to mention is I got a text message from our good friend Andy Andreas. He's the tree breeder, and he was reminding me that after the Shipshawana show, Jay Gingrich, the sponsor of Chasing Giants, is down to about 15% left with this year's inventory. So he wanted me to remind everybody on the show that if you're looking to buy trees, you better get your order in now if you want them this year.
Yeah, they've been selling like hotcakes, so I don't know what 1,500 translates to in numbers, but or 15% rather. But the fact that they've already sold 85% of their stock before the 1st of March bodes well. I do know in the coming years, they're going to have a whole lot more inventory. They're just getting the production ramped up on these new varieties.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to share a screen right now. We need to remind everybody about what's going on out on the East Coast with you coming up. And it's really important for people to communicate because they need head count for food.
Right. So March 9th, the Whitetail Summit in Greenwood, Delaware. It's going to be with our real world distributor out there, Eastern Outdoors. Dr. Bronson Strickland will be there speaking. Andy Andreas, the apple breeder we was just talking about, he's going to be speaking at this event. I'm going to be speaking, and I think they've got a couple more lined up as well. All day event, food. It'll just be a great time to talk about whitetails and learn something. I'm sure I'm going to learn from some of these speakers as well. But they want to know if you're coming by March 1st so they can plan for the food. So give these guys a call as soon as possible. The phone number is 720-648-0067. And you just let them know that you're planning to be at that event on March the 9th in Greenwood, Delaware. Then March 13th, on my way home from that trip, I got a couple consulting jobs, one in Maryland, one in New York, between these two dates. But then on my way home, I'll be stopping at Fredonia, Pennsylvania. There's a dealer event there. John Allen Byler is a dealer out there that's putting on this event. And it's going to be, I think it's an all day long event, actually. But to get details, just give them a call at 724-475-1111. And John will answer any questions you got.
Sounds great. I'd like to make a quick announcement about Lester's Feet. We mentioned in Shipshewana that we now have, it's kind of near and dear to your heart, but we surprised you with the news of the Andrea Hamilton Fund, and I just want to thank everybody for the outpouring of support. Not only did we raise a lot of money in Shipshewana where we released this news, but we've had a lot of engagement and donations, specifically what we call the Pink Fund or the Andrea Fund, and that is money earmarked to help those with breast cancer. So we're really excited about the journey. It's, I'll be honest with you, running a nonprofit foundation is overwhelming sometimes. I had no idea the complexities with the legal side of all of this, but so rewarding to be able to talk to families and be able to help and minister to them. So I can't do that without all the people. And it really centers around this podcast. I mean, we can talk about marketing or whatever of the foundation, but when you really strip it down, the support of that foundation comes from the listeners of this podcast.
Yeah, it does. I remember when we started, it was just the two Ward sisters, and we was going to raffle a hunt or something at my farm to raise some funds for those two little girls. And it blew up to this. And or I shouldn't say we, because I'm a minuscule part of it. But hasn't the foundation written checks for over $1 million now?
Yeah. Well over. So I need to actually go back and do an analysis. Due to some privacy laws, we don't talk too much about specifics of families anymore. We talk very vague. Not a lot of names. Pictures of children are kind of sensitive. Even when the parent gives us permission, things change and health conditions change. So we don't talk specifics as much. But I need to go back and look about how many families we're actually helping or that have been gifted a package under the supervision and approval of our board. It's quite humbling, the difference that we're making. And the process associated with it is trying to be the best steward we can of that donation for the donors. You know, we talk a lot about the families we help, but when somebody donates money to Lester's Feet, you know, in the bylaws, as long as this thing is named after my family, no one will take compensation for working with this foundation. I really wanted this to be 100% volunteer, not just going to a bunch of administrative overhead. And a lot of charities are like that these days. So I think that we talk a lot about, or some about the families, but the donors, are really the heroes in this, not us. We're just connecting the dots of the people that want to support other families in need. We're just connecting the dots to find those families for your behalf. So thank you very much. All right. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we move on to the first question? Or are you ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll.
All right. Let's see what you picked out. I didn't even read the questions tonight. We'll see what you picked out for us.
Well, I did this before I left on my trip several days ago, so I don't even remember what I picked. Um, the first one comes from Hunter Bresnan from Transfer, Pennsylvania. It says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Thank you so much for everything you all do. You have helped me grow not only as a hunter, but as a person as well. I truly look up to both of you. I am 24 years old and pray that someday I turn out to be even half the men you guys are." Well, Hunter, you need to set your bar just a little bit higher than that, please. um, Says, with shed season being upon us, I wanted to ask for a few tips and tricks regarding shed hunting. I was also concerned about putting too much intrusion on the deer when I am shed hunting. What is your opinion on intrusion and shed hunting? God bless to both of you, Trump 2024. Um, well, Hunter, it's the timing of your question is perfect. I've been wanting to get into my sanctuary and look for some antlers, but I actually, instead, in the past week or so, I went and hung a couple more cell cameras on the edge of my sanctuary to keep a better eye on the bucks there. And the I really think that on my property, 75% of the antlers are still on the deer's head. Just a couple days ago, I had a picture with 4 or 5 bucks in it. Every one still had both sides. There's only 2 bucks that I recognize that have shed. One of those has a hurt, injured front foot that he shed early, and then there's one of my up and comers. He also had an injury, some kind of a swelling on his side, and he is shed. But he had that since November, and he stayed in good shape and continued to rut and chase does. So I don't think it's a serious injury, but he did shed. Like to find his sheds too, but when it comes to human intrusion, my philosophy is wait till the majority of those antlers are on the ground and get into your property one time and look thoroughly. Even take friends, family, whatever, and go through that property one time and find your sheds and then get out and stay out. And from a human intrusion standpoint, that's by far the best approach to take. This year, with the mild weather and the fact that I've got a bunch of nutrition on my farm, the deer still have soybeans, they still have NutriCrave corn. They have a big wheat field on my neighbor that butts right up to me that they've been feeding in this warmer weather. Got clover on my place that they've been eating on. They've got everything they need, good nutrition with the mild weather. That just is a no stress situation that causes the deer to hold on to those antlers later. So to be honest, I don't expect a very successful shed antler hunt on my place because the way the weather's setting up, we got temperatures forecast this coming week into the 70s. And typically, I see the bucks starting to disperse from my place in March anyway. And with March being just around the corner and these high temperatures, I think there's going to be a lot of bucks leave my place to their summer range, and they're going to take their antlers with them when they go. So I don't expect a very good antler season this spring, but that's my opinion for what it's worth.
Yeah, you never know. I really like to spend a little bit of time on this question. One of the things that we talk about how your property's laid out kind of special anyway, but when we get a crew on your farm to shed hunt it, we've started on the north or the south end, and we basically walk halfway.
Yep.
So that all the pressure's pushed one direction, because your farm now, especially that you bought the other piece, is a long section of creek bottom, will stop and then go all the way around to the other side and push back. So in hill country, it's tougher to do that because, you got hollers and different places that the deer can go. But in big sections like where you're at, don't just walk one way. push your deer back and forth a little bit on keeping them on your property.
Yeah, if possible. Not every property is going to allow you to do that, but if you can, that puts a whole lot less stress on them. My place, we do it. We just like Terry described. We push half of it towards the middle, then we back out and go around to the other side and push towards the middle, and allows us to cover everything, but do it in such a way that we're not driving the deer off of the property.
The crazy thing is that I have not been on my farm since the end of November. It's 7 miles away, and I have not been there. I've been so busy, and then of course traveling every weekend since the first of the year. So tomorrow I'm going over to the farm. We're going to drive side by side out the alfalfa ridge and through the soybean field just to see if there's anything laying in the field, but I'm not going to go into the timber. I got 4 cell cams that the batteries have been dead. I'm going to go ahead and collect them and start bringing them in and pull cards on the stationary camera. But tomorrow on Sunday will be the first time on my own property. I've walked I don't know how many other properties, but the first time on my property, and finish out consulting season. And actually the first big project on my farm, I haven't told you this, Andy's coming down and we're putting in a very large orchard. I mean, not just fruit trees for habitat. We're actually going to build an orchard on my place. So I
Awesome.
am super excited about having Andy down to show me a few things about apple trees on my place. So, all right, let's go to the second question as it comes up on the screen for you.
This one comes from Joshua Crane from Edgewood, Illinois. Says, "Dear Don and Terry, I love the podcast and I love your witness for Jesus. I'd like to get your opinion on a couple of things. First, what do you think about attractive scents such as dominant buck or doe and heat? I am getting the feeling that the only thing they attract are my dollars. Second, rattling and grunting. I very rarely rattle anything in, and if I do, I usually get busted by a young buck." Well, Joshua, I can tell you that you hit the nail on the head. Um, most of these products are designed to separate you from your money. And I'm not going to say none of them work. They'll all work to some degree. But when you start talking about mature bucks in heavily hunted regions of the country, by the time they get mature, they've seen it all. I mean, they've smelled every scent in the woods, everything that a hunter could throw at them. They've heard the rattles and the grunt calls. They've heard it all. And a mature buck is just not going to come charging in most places to check those things out. In fact, I describe it as you bang those rattling antlers together, and you might as well be blowing a trombone, telling the deer, "Here I am, here I am. Don't come over here near this tree." You're way better to the element of surprise. Years ago, Gabe Schaffner, the late great Gabe Schaffner from Clark County, Illinois, said he described it as well as anyone that I've ever heard. And he said, a mature buck is already a bundle of nerves and totally alert as he's moving through the woods anyway. It's so tough just to get him to walk by your tree stand and not detect you that when you throw a scent at him or you try to rattle or call, he just became hyper alert. And now he's not just casually looking for you as if a mature buck is ever casual about anything, but now you've taken all his senses to an even higher level. Now
Right.
he's really looking with his eyes. He's really trying to use his nose.
Yep.
He is trying to find the source of that scent or that call or those rattling antlers. And it's just so tough to do that you end up, I really believe you end up spooking 20 bucks for every mature buck that you call in. 20 mature bucks you will spook for every mature buck you call in.
Can I ask you a couple clarifying questions because we're going to get hate mail coming in as soon as noon tomorrow on that answer? Do you
Well,
think that rattling has a more effective ratio at different parts of the country? Like South
Absolutely.
Texas, where the bucks are so much thicker than in the Midwest? Is your answer based on what you're hunting in Illinois?
Absolutely. I mean, you got to remember that deer, there's some very basic habits that stay with them no matter where they are. But there's also some regional differences, and a good example is right out here where I've been in the open plains of Kansas and Nebraska. Those deer use their eyes a lot more than our Midwestern deer do. The plain states bucks, that's why decoying works so well out here in the plains, because a buck sees that decoy from a mile away and here he's coming to check it out. In the Midwest, a decoy, for every mature buck you decoy in the Midwest, I promise you're going to spook 20 others. It's just not an effective tactic. And you mentioned rattling, and rattling in Texas, way more effective. And I think the reason for it is the buck doe ratios are way tighter in Texas. I mean, a lot of those places, those big ranches, are managed for a 1-to-1 buck to doe ratio. And so you've got so many more bucks and you got so many more buck fights, because of just the increased number, that those deer it's a sound that they hear a lot more often. It's more common to them, is my theory, is why they respond to it so better, because they've heard so many real buck fights. And yeah,
Yeah.
so there's
Well,
definite regional differences.
I think that we have a lot of our fans and listeners that take what we say very literal. So I think it's important for us to put some caveats in on that. The second thing I was going to ask you is, you've openly talked about how you use scent when you shot the Joey buck.
Hmm.
And why don't you talk just a little bit about that? Because some people who have watched that video might say, well, you just dismissed scent, but you used it on that hunt, but not like most people use it. So talk a little bit about what you did that hunt before we go to the next question.
Yeah, so I think the typical deer hunter, he buys a bottle of scent and he either gets to his stand and he puts it on a rag and hangs the rag on a branch, or maybe he has a drag rag, that he drags to his stand. He's trying to use that scent to pull a buck to his location so that he could shoot that buck. And that I've to be honest, I have never had that work, never ever. And I don't do it anymore. But back in my younger days, when I was trying anything and everything, I mean, most of these lessons I'm sharing, I learned the hard way. And I can't tell you how many bottles of scent I've bought over the years, and never one time did I attract a deer to that scent. Now I say that, and here I am promoting smoky scent on these ropes. Now, for whatever reason, Smoky seems to be doing the ticket for me anyway, and I know there's other good scents as well. But we're pulling them to a rope, and a lot of times they'll come in and inspect that rope in the dark, at least the first time. But it's just when I shot the Trump buck, it was a totally different situation, or not Trump, the Joey buck.
Mm-hmm.
I was hunting a thicket where my shooting lane was really narrow, and I had to. I knew that it was in November during the rut. I knew if a buck came by, he was probably coming on a fast walk. He wasn't just going to be lollygagging along where I could shoot him. I knew he was going to be on the move, and I needed him to stop in that one and only shooting lane that I had. And I felt the best way to do that was just to douse that spot with a deer scent. I don't think it even mattered what deer scent it was. I just happened to have a bottle of Smoky's Doe and Heat, a 4-ounce bottle, and I went over to the spot before I climbed into my stand where my one shooting lane was on the trail I was covering. And I took that entire 4-ounce bottle and I just threw it up on tree branches and right on the trail and everywhere. And the plan was that buck would be coming through on a fast walk or a trot, and he would smell that scent and he would lock up and give me a chance to shoot. And that's exactly what happened. I just happened to see the buck coming before he hit that shooting lane. And whenever he stepped into that shooting lane, I was at full draw already. And as I'm at full draw, he just stops and locks up as he smelled that scent. And when he did, it was too late. I mean, he was like 12 yards from my stand, and I was only 10 feet off the ground. And it was one of the easiest shots I'll ever have at a mature buck. But that scent stopped him. If that scent had not been there on the ground, he would have just blew right through that shooting lane, and I would have had to shoot him on the move.
Yeah, and then you potentially have a shot further back than what you want, or try to time it and hit something on the way. And so just a different approach for using the scent. I wanted you to clarify that before we went on to the next question.
Something else I might throw out there is that buck was not on my farm, and in the past week I've had two people try to discredit me by saying the only big deer I shoot are on my farm. That deer was not on my farm, and that whole premise is not even worth going into, or that whole argument. But that's a buck that was not on my farm.
Yep. All right. Next question.
This one comes from Eric from Lincoln, Nebraska. Don and Terry, first, thank you both for helping spread the saving power of our Lord Jesus Christ. I have attended your master class and have had West Elks come out to consult on 3 of my properties last year. I have 2 questions. First, I'm going to be planting my switchgrass bedding this spring. Like you have suggested before, I'm going to mix in miscanthus as well. My question is, how should I plant miscanthus rhizomes? Should I plant in an X shape, straight line, run it east-west or north-south? Should I plant on top of a hill or more in the bottom? I just want to prepare the bed with a rototiller before I no-till in the switchgrass. Second, what is the best way to prepare last year's deadly dozen plot for this coming year? I still have green plants growing. Is it best to spray everything with Roundup this spring? Thank you for all you do for the hunting community. Well, I'll answer your second question first, Eric. Yeah, on that deadly dozen plot, go in this spring before you plant whatever it is you're going to plant, and just spray glyphosate and kill everything that's there, and start fresh. You can either no-till into that dead vegetation, or you can work it up and then plant. In regards to miscanthus in switchgrass, there's no right or wrong way to go about it. There's just so many different options. So to give you a couple, one of my favorites has become, before I plant a new switchgrass field, I like to go in there with a tree seedling planter, which is how I plant it, make rows about 10 to 12 feet apart. And if someone is riding on that planter, just have them randomly throw in a rhizome as you're driving through the field. It could be 5 feet apart, 10 feet apart, 20 feet apart. Just randomly grab one and throw it in here, wait a little bit, throw another one in, wait a little bit, throw another one in. It doesn't matter. Very random. And with these rows every 10, 12 feet, you just end up with a field of these clumps of miscanthus throughout your switchgrass. And what's so great about it is that a lot of times those deer, when they're bedded in that switchgrass, they will bed right at at the base of a clump of the miscanthus, which is taller and stands up better to the snow and such. You can also plant shapes like X's, L's, whatever, and those deer like to bed in the corners. From what I've seen, you got an X, you got 4 pockets there where the 2 lines come together. That the deer like to bed in. An L shape gives you 1 pocket. A T shape would give you 2 of those pockets. There's no right or wrong with that. Now, if you've got a tree stand along the edge of that field somewhere, that's where you would plant a straight line. That line would basically start at the edge of the switchgrass right by your stand, at 20 yards or whatever range you want to shoot the deer at. Because they will follow that strip of miscanthus right out to the edge. So you'd start at your stand out at shooting range, and then just plant a row back into the heart of that switchgrass field. And any deer bedded out there will very likely bed along the edge of that miscanthus, and then when they get ready to exit the switchgrass field, they will just follow that line of miscanthus right out to the edge and right in front of your stand. So those are some of the ways to go about that. If you got a switchgrass planting on the edge of your property or your property boundary, you might put 2 or 3 rows of miscanthus right along the property boundary, just to screen it a little bit better. So just countless ways that you can use miscanthus within switchgrass.
Yep. Sounds great. All right, next question should be popping up right now.
This one comes from Adam Smith from Casey, Illinois. Says, "Hey, Don and Terry, I recently ordered 50 red cedar trees off Jay's new website to line the roadside frontage to one of my properties to act as a permanent screen. The property has around 30 Arkansas black apple and Kiefer pear trees already in place, about 200 yards from where I plan to plant the cedars. However, after doing more research on trees, I've run across a lot of people with cedar apple rust. I don't know how people get it, but have you ever had a problem with this on your property? And can I protect my investment with a fungicide or copper solution?" Yeah, Adam.
Is he asking if people are getting it, or that the people that own the property, the trees, are getting it? That's the stupid question of the day. I've never heard of this.
Well, I think there was just some poor wording there. I think he's worried about the cedars that he is going to plant on his property, if they're going to cause him trouble with his apple and pear trees. Well, the pear trees are not going to be a problem, but the apple trees could be, depending on the variety of apples. There's several varieties of apples that are resistant to the cedar apple rust. It's a fungus, and it's carried by both those trees. And if you've got cedars, it can really affect your apple trees. It can, in fact, kill them. Some trees it won't kill. You'll just have these little spots on the leaf of the apple tree. So most apple diseases are basically diseases of the leaf.
I see.
And that's one of it. It's not going to affect your pear trees whatsoever. But you say you got 30 Arkansas black apples. Arkansas black are pretty resistant to cedar apple rust. But I just thought I would throw in there, while we're on this topic, that when you're planting an apple orchard, you want to use several different varieties. Now, they all need to be very disease resistant, and they need to have late bloom times as much as possible to prevent, losing your apple crop if you get a late frost in the spring after they've bloomed. And they need to have a late drop time. So you don't want your apples dropping in August, 2 months before hunting season. So you want those disease resistant, late dropping apples. And a lot of times those late droppers will also be late bloomers. I know that Andy will be getting into this in a lot more depth at that event in Delaware. The tree varieties that he's developed, he took this to the ultimate level. In fact, I think we shared this on this podcast before, maybe not, maybe it was on the Whitetail Master Academy, but he's done such a great job with his apple breeding program that there was a lady at Ohio State University that she was overseas somewhere for 2 years working on some apple breeding project. And when she saw what Andy was doing and how good his trees were as far as disease resistance, she aborted that project overseas that she had invested 2 years in and ran with his trees. I learned a lot interviewing Andy and this lady, whose name I cannot recall, last summer. But that's where I learned that most apple diseases are something that's going to affect the leaf. So apples are not native to the United States. They are native to Kazakhstan. I think it's a region whose climate is a whole lot drier than ours in the United States, and the humidity in our climate does not suit the apples all that well.
So that's why it's all fungus. It's fungus based then, correct?
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah.
So interesting. I never knew that. So the apples are originally from a very dry climate.
Right.
Huh.
And if you see an apple with an issue, it's going to be a leaf issue. You see a tree that's got, like it looks like it's got about half or a third the leaves it should have. It's got some kind of a leaf issue. But these trees that Andy has developed, you can look at them and there can be diseased trees all around, diseased apple trees all around them. But these trees will just be leafed out so full, and you look at the leaf, and the leaf is, basically perfect. It's got no imperfections in it. So um, these apple trees are as good as anything you can buy anywhere.
Okay. Learn something every day.
Yep. And they would be resistant to that cedar apple rust fungus,
Gotcha.
among other things.
It looks like I
Um,
just did a quick Google search on my phone. It looks like there is some organic and some chemical solutions that are out there, but that would be like you and I giving somebody health advice. We're going to pass on that.
yeah, Andy'd be the guy to ask. But next question, anyway. This is from Justin Rice from Poignette, Wisconsin. I hope I said that name right. Says, Dear Don and Terry, I was recently listening to another podcast, and a pretty well-known hunter talked about bucks leaving at 4 to 5 years old and then come back years later because of the food that he has on his property. Have you noticed this on your properties? This is the first time I've heard this brought up, and was curious on your input. Justin, I have never had a buck, a 4-year-old buck, as you described here, leave my property and be gone for a year or two and then show back up. I've just never had it happen, but I know it does happen. Too many whitetail land managers that I respect have had it happen, and definitely trust what they say. So I know that it can and does happen. I just have never had that happen. As far as the food bringing them back, that's been my theory about these um, strange bucks, if you will, that show up at my place in the winter. So during the rut, I do not have strange bucks show up. They just don't. Whatever's on my farm, and by mid to late October, those are the bucks that are going to be there during the rut. There's just not new ones showing up. However, I do get new bucks showing up starting about the 1st of December, and they're showing up for the food, no doubt about it. I mean, if they were showing up for any other reason, for does or whatever, they would have been there during the rut. But my theory is that those bucks were on my farm as fawns with their mother the first year of their life, the first winter of their life, and they later dispersed, which yearling bucks do. Mother Nature's way of preventing inbreeding. Those bucks disperse, find a new home range, and then when they go to that new home range, and winter sets in, and bad weather, and they can't find food, at least quality food, they remember where they had food as a fawn, and they come back. I just can't come up with any other explanation. And the reason for that, I believe this, is because I've got a pretty unique situation on my property where I can hang trail cameras on my neighbors, not all my neighbors, but several neighbors, in about a 1 to 3 mile radius around my farm. In every direction, I've got at least one other property in every direction that I can put cameras on, and in some directions, a lot of properties. And so I'm getting pictures of bucks not only on my farm, but surrounding for a mile or two. And these new bucks that show up are not bucks that were on those surrounding mile or two radius. These new bucks are coming from farther away. Now, how did they know that that food was there? They're either smelling it for 4 or 5 miles, or they knew it was there from being there previously. And now some of those bucks on the surrounding um, properties, they do show up on my farm as well. But there's a good percentage of those late season incoming bucks that were never anywhere within a couple miles of my farm before the late season. And the worse the weather gets, the more of them that show up.
So I'm going to make a statement that's half statement and half question, and you pick it apart and answer it, all right?
Yep.
It has to do with his question about a 4-year-old leaving. So I think that I agree 100% with your past statements that as a buck gets older, a lot of times his home range will get smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always deviations to that. So if you have a 4-year-old when he gets 5, the circle just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And I think you've made the comment before, when a buck gets even older, he's easier to kill because if he's in your home range or he's there, he's not as likely to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible what these people are talking about with a buck that's 6, 7 years old is he started getting his home range shrunk, which took him off of your property, but then something happened in the smaller home range and he kind of shifted that a little bit? And it's kind of contradictory because a lot of times we say that it's really hard to get a buck to shift its range or its annual pattern after he gets it figured out. But external factors, could that push him back to where he miraculously appears at 6 and 7?
I think that's very possible. In fact, I'd never thought about it, but it makes total sense. His range has shrank, but before it shrank, he had a larger range that maybe encompassed a particular property. And who knows? Something may have caused him to use range that hadn't used for a while.
Or went back to something he was comfortable with before?
Yep.
I just think about in like big open ag country with small pockets of woods is completely different to where I live, where we just have wood fingers going everywhere and just fields and roads intertwined. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking out in open ag, the range gets smaller and it starts taking certain woodlots out of the equation of where he goes. But then they go in and they clear cut a grove to put ag field in it. And part of that goes, or they go in and build a house or a barn dominium on the middle of that property. That's going to affect something. I don't think it's enough that you could statistically really capture it.
Yeah, and I don't think, well, I know we're not ever going to figure these things out, totally. But, every buck has got a different personality. And, people are similar. We all sleep at night and we all get up during the day for the most part. But, some of us get up at 5 a.m. and some of us get up at noon. There's just different, characteristics or personalities of these different deer. And I think when it comes to watching and eventually targeting and killing these giants, I think the key to success is learning about that buck from the time he's like 3 to 5 or 6. Say you're going to target him at 6 years old. Well, you start learning his habits at 3. So you got the year he's 3, the year he's 4, the year he's 5. You got 3 years before he becomes 6 years old when you can put pieces of the puzzle together. And you can learn his entire range by having cameras spread over a wide area. And that's really the key to killing these deer is learning their habits, because each one is just a little bit different, personality wise, habit wise. Even on one property, like my property, I'll have cameras on my 120 acres where I get a particular mature buck's picture frequently, and I'll have other cameras where I almost never get his picture. But yet other mature bucks, I do get their picture there. They'll just utilize a particular property different. Different bucks will utilize the same property differently.
Yeah, and my takeaway from this is if you really want to increase your odds and chances, diverse food and bedding without intrusion is the ultimate formula because you're providing what he's not going to get in other places. So, especially attracting bucks at different points of their life or different points of the year. If you got that food late season, that's a game changer for you.
Yep. We're never going to figure them out completely.
All right, well, no, and to say every buck is always going to act. What's the phrase that Dr. Strickland says? Never say always or never.
Yep.
In science, it doesn't exist. Never say always. Never say never.
Yep. And that certainly applies to mature whitetail bucks, no doubt about it.
All right, well, that pretty much wraps up the questions. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you got planned? You're going to be on the road for a couple more days, and then you and I are going to rendezvous next weekend to prepare for the annual Dealer Summit, the first of its kind. We're bringing in all of our dealers from across the country, not only for training, but a little bit of entertainment and education, too.
Yeah, I've got a couple more days on this trip. Go home. Actually, going to meet with Chris Yates on Monday and get a new truck. Be my fourth truck from Chris. So kind of excited to get that new truck. Head home. Going to try to get some stuff done around home in regards to deer work that has not been done this winter because I've been on the road so much. I got the whole family coming in next weekend. Both my daughters and sons-in-law, grandsons. Going to spend the weekend with us, and then we'll have the dealer event on Monday and Tuesday. Looking forward to having all those dealers come in from all over. Got some fun things planned for it. Going to have Chasing Giants Bingo on the next podcast. So the next podcast, no, we'll do one more before that, right? We'll do one more before that live event.
Right. We need to record next weekend. I'm not sure how we do that because I'm going to be leaving Friday night. We probably need to record Thursday night this coming week. And then the one that we record on Monday night will air the following week. That's right.
Yeah. So that one we'll be playing bingo at the dealer event. The dealers will be asking the questions. So Terry and I will have no time to prepare. And they'll also be playing bingo. There's been some bingo cards made with some of the phrases that Terry and I use, like tee it up, perspective, garbage, purple-haired freaks, Don's 98. There's just all kinds of little phrases that these bingo cards will have. And haven't decided what the prize is going to be for the first person that yells out bingo. But we'll have to come up with something.
I don't know. We need to yell Booner instead of bingo.
There you go. Dr. Strickland will be there teaching us about whitetail nutrition. Several speakers the second morning, but got some free things for the dealers that show up, some free gifts, and got some awards for some dealers and distributors. It'll be a great time. Hope to see all the dealers there.
Well, again, thank you for all your support, prayers. Keep trying to make this podcast better and make it what you want to talk about. We're never going to make anybody happy, and we're okay with that. But we really, there's been a lot of people that have found us in the last, say, 4 or 5 months and have gone back and listened to every episode. I get those comments all the time. So I think that some people new people are finding us, but the people that were with us from the very beginning, we truly appreciate your all support. It means a lot.
Yeah, I heard from a lot of people at Shipshawana last weekend about the podcast. So everywhere we go, people want to know, where's Terry?
In line for Little Debbie's.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for your support. Have a great week.
God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.